kind of like getting interested in to invest in Japanese startup. And then so that's kind of interesting. And also like a lot of like even the one check size become way bigger compared to 2020. So definitely pandemic accelerate and thriving the startup culture in Japan. But like interesting that I've seen, I just came back from Japan yesterday. And then even for me, it's been like almost 2 years since I came back from Japan. And before the COVID, I went to Japan like 3 or 4 times a year. And I feel like because of pandemic, Japan started to be isolated. Even like it has been globalized a lot before the pandemic, but actually it stopped the globalizing in Japan, and Japan started to be isolated, even though the amount of investment from foreigners become bigger. And there's a lot of cultural reasons, traditional background, blah, blah, blah. But I think the reason why is even the demand of those technology, like digital transformation, AI, is getting higher. Japan is the most high-aging, lowest birth rate, developed country in the world. Our problem, especially for the technology side, even with trying to thrive to technology, a lot of senior people couldn't catch up. But then pandemic changed the culture, and even senior people getting used to fintech, using the online payment. Started to using Zoom. Before the pandemic, they're using Foxmail, which we thought died. So the demand are getting higher. So a lot of people actually investing, purchasing those like technology. But at the same time, a lot of technology companies started to only in the domestic market. So that's why the size is getting bigger, but then the like kind of globalism is getting slower. So I think that it's the big opportunity for Japanese startup to go see outside and looking for expanding to outside Japan by leveraging their the kind of experiences and their marketing skills and the funding from during the COVID. Also, I think for the foreigner startup side, for our foreigner outside investor standpoint, it's such a good opportunity to start talk, because we kind of like start opening the border. So it's such a good timing for them to start connecting with them and help them expand, or trying to have kind of joint venture with existing company in Japan to bring their technology to Japan. That's how I felt when I was in Japan.
What about you, Eja? What do you see? How has the pandemic changed the startup scene where you are?
Well, so 2 years ago when COVID first hit, we were in Mongolia. We were at language learning app initially. And so COVID happened, everything closed. School systems, nobody could go to like a physical language training center. So for us, it was a great news because now everybody using our app to learn a language. So that took off really nicely for us. And then the second thing was in Mongolia, a lot of the larger institutions, schools were struggling to distribute their content online because they didn't have the digital infrastructure to do so. So we started doing a lot of white label kind of like technical solution mobile app as an infrastructure for these institutions. And that's how we naturally pivoted into become the drag and drop app builder. So I think for us, that was a really good news. Now, EdTech is like everybody's talking about EdTech. Previously, it was FinTech. And I think COVID really accelerated growth in the education industry, how we can learn from home, and then also mobile, right? Because coming from Mongolia, not everybody has a laptop or PC, but everybody has a smartphone and they are on Facebook or they are on Instagram. But so like, we really have to cater towards this like youth who has a mobile penetration first, and how do we help them actually learn on their mobile phones? And that's the space we are in. So I think in a sense, we got really lucky.
And now that the world's opening back up, Eja, do you think things are gonna change? Are we gonna go back to more in classroom learning? Is EdTech going to suddenly become, the thing of the past now that we're meeting in person
I
again?
think it's gonna be hybrid, right? Like when people are in their schools, it's gonna be more discussions and I think more like interactions, but they don't want to waste time just being lectured or seminared. So a lot of the content's gonna be consumed home, but then the interaction is gonna happen in person. So the same with now that we are moved to, expanded to US, a lot of our target market is actually not the educational institutions, but more creator economy, creator people. Because in the US, we see a lot of people, even adults, consume YouTube for learning new things, right? So it's not the traditional schools, that's how people learn, but still like these other like social platforms where people spend a lot of time to learn things and communicate with creators. So I think that's still going to be a big space for us to kind of see where a mobile app, builder can go. So it's still an exciting time for us.
And what do you think, Takaho, as things come back online, things come open again in Japan, how is that going to change the environment there in the startup scene? And you're saying there's more money flowing in, but there's still very much a kind of insular view happening in Japan. So what happens now that things open up again?
I hope they're gonna open up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. They slowly starting to open up, but still, foreigners cannot get in if they are foreigners. But then I hope it will be changed. I think when I say that it's very difficult for Japanese people to change. The change is not necessarily good words for them. But I see a lot of people, even like a political situation, economic situation, like a lot of like senior executive are like 70, 80s and they stay there. But then we've been seeing a lot of change of the generation finally. And definitely it's going to change the taxis as the scene. Even the senior people started to have some feeling we needed to change. So hopefully we're gonna have change. Also, like the pandemic definitely helped them to notice the changing as the important for us to move forward.
And Edith, a lot of the trends you described are macro trends, happening throughout the startup world, right? And so as we again come out of the pandemic, do you think any of that is going to change? Is pitching on Zoom here to stay? What are some things that will kind of revert back, and what are some things that are gonna stay, do you think, in this as things hopefully open up post-COVID?
I think what's interesting is I'm sitting in Palo Alto right now, and in the last few weeks, we're actually during Chinese New Year break, I have quite a few visitors actually from Singapore, and also some from China, knowing that they're going to go back for 3 weeks quarantine. I think that I missed it in person, and we, at least in the mainland in the US, I'm actually seeing many startup activities already happening. Few weeks ago, there was ETH Denver. Thousands of developers are, and then of course here in the US, Miami is a hot spot. There will be Miami Tech Week happening. Me personally, I'm actually we'll be doing a little bit of traveling this few months because things are slowly opening up. As much as I still think Zoom is super efficient, I think if you are a startup and you'll be surprised because the investor are also going crazy. They want to meet you. And if you actually kind of thinking you wanted to stand out and really show up, start meeting some of them, building relationship, that's really, I think, investor and founder relationship is built on trust, and it's hard to build trust purely over Zoom. And things are coming back. So it's a good thing. So come visit.
Yeah. Well, I know that Blue Startups is planning to come to San Francisco. So we'll hit you up when we're there on April 20th. We're going to do an investor day in person. So, we'll see how that goes, but we're excited to give it a shot. So along those lines, Edith, in terms of cross-border kind of investing and deals, like where do you think the opportunity is now in those cross-border deals? Are you guys doing a lot of cross-border investing right now? Are you doing mostly deals out of California? Kind of what are you looking at?
I would say like majority of our companies They may even say that they are located in San Francisco, but the reality, they're not here at all. So I think but at a minimum though, I think for us, most of our portfolio companies, they do want to go to market in the US, which I think, with Blue Startup, with you have super international and global companies that you invested in. I think for us is we're pretty used to the fact that we start tracking, 2 years ago when COVID first started, within our database, we track distributed yes or no. I can tell you 99% of the companies are distributed now. And recently what we're seeing also, we have invested in companies in Australia. We have actually invested in American and of actually setting up offices in Singapore or in Taiwan. So the world is super global. And again, I think have a lot to do with, depends on what you focus on. We're very, very active in the DeFi space. We're looking more and more in the NFT infrastructure space. Or we continue to look at a lot of like developers tools, enterprise, open source. I mean, all the developers are literally everywhere in the world. So it's an exciting time, and we don't actually care where you are located.
Yep, I think that's absolutely true. It's just distributed teams are everywhere, right? It's an interesting development now that, for example, we're in Hawaii, and in part we're state funded, and state funders say, well, how many jobs have you created? I'm like, well, I created some jobs in Argentina, some jobs, because that's, of course, the jobs are everywhere, right? And so it becomes an interesting thing to measure. Where is this company located, right? And how you measure it. So I think that's a modern conundrum now, like how we consider the headquarters of a place. I have companies that are headquartered in Hawaii, but the majority of the people who work for that company are elsewhere. And I have the opposite, right? I have companies that are headquartered in LA, but the majority of people are working here. So it's really interesting. Takaho, what do you see in terms of the cross-border kind of opportunities right now? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely the more opportunities are opening up. From Japanese standpoint, as I said, since they have a lot of funding, so they're holding a lot of cash. So if they have opportunity to go expand their technology, their services outside Japan, this is definitely a good opportunity. And also the good news is that Japan government get rid of quarantine for Japanese people to quarantine when they come back to Japan. It's still hard for a foreigner to go into Japan, but for the Japanese people, it gets easier to go outside. So I think I'm going to start encouraging Japanese startups, especially they love coming to Hawaii, right? Of course, they would love expense their funding to come to Hawaii. Hey, we want to see the outside of Japan to see the opportunity, right? For the startup standpoint, American startup standpoint, I've been having a difficult to invite a lot of investors to invest American startups, because specifically talking about Hawaii, there are very early stage startups in Hawaii, but then only the institutional, there's not many institutional the only investors who will be interested in investing early stage from Japan will be angel investors. And those angel investors are very kind of caring about the relationship between the investors founder. So they're not going to invest them until they see them, and institutional investors, they willing to invest without seeing, but then sometimes they're not looking for the early stage startup. So definitely once those angel investors are able to come to US, I could bring more opportunity to introduce American startup, early stage startup, to see them, and then they are more opportunity to invest them. And especially I feel like in Hawaii specifically, impact investment, Japanese people are very interested in impact investment, because especially we have earthquake, we have so many disasters, we are islands surrounding the water. We have so many social problems, including gender gap, aging, the child care, senior care. So definitely those impact investments, they're eager to look for the opportunity and technology and ideas outside Japan. Yeah, so I think once we open up, I'm really looking for this new thing that's coming up, especially in Hawaii.
And Eja, you are a cross-border startup. So tell us a little bit about that journey and, what are some of the opportunities you see as a cross-border company and what are some of the challenges for you?
Yeah, I think operationally, I think coming from an Asian startup, it's really nice because you have a proof of concept, easy to understand your market kind of initially, and then you bring that technology to US. So just the cost of building a technical product and having a team in Asia is definitely a benefit or strength when you are expanding your operations to US. So I think that really worked for us. The second thing is because of the time zone differences, it really is great because the company never sleeps. I get in touch with my team members and then I sleep and then I get up and then those things are done, right? So I think that's the best thing about working in this cross-border, really leveraging the time zones. So those are the two things very good about the operations. From the VC and investment perspective, we have a Mongolian VC that's invested in us. We have Singaporean VC, and then we have obviously Blue Startups and the US VC is also invested. So I think this is a really interesting, time to have all of these different VCs from everywhere kind of just be interested in the product and the technical solution because they don't doubt as long as the technology is good, it could be applicable anywhere. So I think that's the great thing about, the cross borders and how now investors and operations are also very much flexible these days. And I think we're just, witnessing that ourselves.
Yeah, well, that is the positive about time zones. There's a lot of negatives about time zones. I know that people are always concerned about we need technology to figure out how to flatten the earth in that way, Edith, not just being able to collaborate, but in the same time zones somehow, do away with time zones. I don't know. It's impossible. It's an impossible problem to solve. But I wanted to talk about this kind of changing landscape as well in Asia. So now we know what was happening before COVID, and we had this kind of 2-year pause, and things are starting to come back online. So we're seeing a big shift in the US in terms of where things are happening, right? This kind of decentralization, I guess, of activity in the startup world, right? So whereas all roads used to lead to San Francisco, now it's a little bit more, we're talking about Denver, we're talking about Austin, we're talking about Miami, we're talking about New York again, and Seattle, and these kind of other hotspots are popping up. So I'm curious as to what you guys see in Asia as well, because we've had some major shifts, like the issues in Hong Kong, where that was a hotspot, maybe not so much anymore, kind of. So where are those new places coming, the up and coming kind of Asian hotspots? Edith, I'd love your take on that.
I'm really biased because I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, and actually in 2020 it started although 100% virtual, Founders Hong Kong, which is a nonprofit that we try to connect as many Hong Kong founders to international investor. So on quick update on that, it's so interesting. I think when things are not going well in certain aspect of life, then startup is really all about being the resilient when there's no way, you find a way. And people may not know, actually, Hong Kong now have 10 unicorn, and a handful of them from the Animoca or Amber group of the world, whereas in the crypto space, to Logistic, which is the GoGoX or the Lala Move. And so this is really, or the Relap, which is sort of the fintech area. And it's interesting to see Hong Kong, where they have definitely a lot of talents between crypto, fintech, and also logistics. And I think for the rest of Asia, it really depends. I think certainly what's going on in China with a lot of regulatory, Chinese government take a very hands-on approach. So basically eliminate the ad tech industry overnight, kind of scary to see. So just have to definitely be aware of what's going on regulatory wise. But I think like in Singapore, actually, in some sense, benefit quite a bit. I'm seeing a lot of Hong Kong and also mainland Chinese founders have moved to Singapore for various different reasons. So it's really good time for Singapore, I think. And so in some sense, it's really depends, again, what depends on what you focus on. I do, at the end of the day, in addition to market, I always sort of look for talents. And I do think that different cities have very different nature in terms of talent pool. I'm very, very bullish, actually, particularly on Vietnam. I think they are very interesting, great engineers, a lot of talents, because the VNG, sort of the VNG is like Tencent of Vietnam. They have really great talents in the gaming space, a lot of really awesome engineers. And so the world talent pool is where, well, I would love to go. I'm planning a trip to go to Singapore sometime this year. So hopefully get a chance to connect with some of you guys over there.
Yeah. Well, take me with you. Singapore is one place I have not yet gone. It's like
let's go
hotspot in Asia that I've never gotten a chance to check out. Yeah, but definitely agree with you about Vietnam. I did get a chance to spend a couple of weeks there teaching an MBA course, actually, and the students were such a driven bunch. That's what really stood out to me. Like they have just a lot of drive and ambition right now. So it's an interesting kind of rebirthing young economy, young workforce, right? So a lot of tech talent and the like. So it's interesting. Takaho, what's your thoughts on kind of up and coming Asian ecosystems here?
Yeah, I mean, this again, like I'm not sure about the other regions. Like talking about Japan, there's a lot of like good opportunity or good new interesting businesses happening outside Japan. Outside Tokyo. So actually, because of the pandemic, a lot of big companies started to do remote work, and they require the people to come to office every month or once in a week. Especially people have a strong mind, you have to be in Tokyo if you want to be out of bounds. But at the same time, a lot of young people start getting out from Tokyo and move to like a more rural area or local regions. And also local regions and rural regions definitely have more island program compared to Tokyo or Osaka, big city. So like more program, more innovation could happen, right? And then because also those like a government, I mean like those like a government, local government acknowledge the program, they have a lot of interesting program for startup entrepreneurship to solve those program. So for example, Kobe City or Fukuoka Prefecture, I think that they will issue the visa for outside foreigner startup to make the company and have complete free tax for first year to stay there. So a lot of local government companies trying to encourage the foreign, like non-Japanese startup to come to Japan. And the good news about Japan, there's no time difference. Yay. so no matter where you are, you're in Okinawa, you can work to the Tokyo within the same time. So that's good benefit. Actually, I was traveling because my hometown is Kagoshima, located in the South area in Japan, and all my clients is like office in Tokyo. By traveling Osaka, Fukuoka, Tokyo, and my hometown, but I didn't have any problem to have a Zoom meeting. Especially right now, a lot of even senior executives familiar with using Zoom. So that's gonna be good, definitely a good opportunity for a lot of both foreigner and a good startup. And then also, I usually encourage Hawaii company, not only startup, even small business people, if they want to open up the business, don't open it up in Tokyo because the rent is high, it's very competitive. But if you go outside of Tokyo, that's competitive. There's much need of those technology.
Interesting. Yeah. Helpful to have a vertically oriented
yes.
country.
Yeah, really long.
Yeah. Eja, what about you? Do you have an opinion about the hotspots in Asia?
No, I think we're just very interested in going west, so not very familiar with the
Yeah. What
Asian
about
landscape yet.
Mongolia? How about Mongolia as a hotspot?
I think we're just very small as a market. We only got 3 million people, so not a lot of people are interested. So definitely not the hotspot, but we got great talent pool. As Edith said, we have a lot of engineers, and I think that's how we want to leverage our talent and go expand beyond.
Yeah, TomYo, when you guys were in the cohort, it was, for a startup, they would say like, okay, so next week we're going to build these features. And I'd be like, yeah, right, in a week, no way. But, they have 16 engineers back in Mongolia that just bang it out and it's done. So it is a huge advantage for a startup to have that kind of tech power behind them, All right, so I do want to open it up for questions. If you have a question, you can use the Q&A function, or you can raise your hand and be brave, and I'll bring you up on stage to ask it live. So we do have a question here about thoughts on the Ukraine war and how that's going to impact global investors and startups. Eja, I'll start with you. You're maybe the closest geographically to this situation.
Yeah. So we have a joke in Mongolia. We're right between China and Russia, right? So China started COVID and Russia now starts like this entire war. So we're not in a very happy neighborly mood, but we have to stay neutral. And I think, it's affecting everybody back home. Prices are going up. And I think the only thing right now is to really just focus on what we do best, and with like the technology, the solutions we're making, hopefully we can just think about the other ways to get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Takaho, what do you think in terms of the impact?
It's very difficult. When I was in Japan, this war started, and then we always talking about COVID, like how many new cases happening before this Ukraine war. And then like once the war started, nobody's talking about the COVID. And then all about like this war. But then definitely it's not like good impact, especially Japan is very, very complicated situation where we are the ally with US. We have a lot of American bases in Japan. But then we are close to China. We have some land problem with Russia. So we become very conservative from this. So, but at the same time, like this time, usually Japanese people like kind of like don't care about the war, even the war standing somewhere when the war, they were like, hey, whatever, like we peace. But this time it's different. I've been seeing a lot of different people's reaction at this time. Mm-hmm. So hopefully people go a little bit more, feel sympathy with the people and they do something. And instead of just be conservative and protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Edith, what do you think?
We actually did a lot of work around helping our founders to get prepared. We actually wrote internal memos for our portfolio company to think about a few things. One, we actually have companies with offices in Ukraine. So about in January, we had a lot of conversation about helping them to basically relocate some of the team members to nearby countries like Poland and Czech Republic, and basically almost offer relocation packages. Although Ukrainians are very patriotic, many of them actually didn't even want to leave, which is a different problem. And then the second is to actually get prepared on certain customers of our companies may now become part of the sanction list. And what that means is they will have to say goodbye to some of their customers. And then also we invest in a lot of developers tool, open source, open core. And one of our companies is seeing a large amount of visitors from Russia wanted to download certain packages of what they're offering. And then we end up advising them to actually block certain IP addresses from specific countries. This is something that many of our early stage startups never have to deal with before. And then just in general, also particularly with teams, the other way, right? We also have companies with Russian employees, and it's not their fault. So just be super sensitive about everybody have different sentiment towards the situation. It's just unfortunate these days we can't avoid politics, but we just need to be very, very conscious about from a customer point of view, from a team point of view. And then also we don't know what is going to happen. And if this continue, and we hope not, but it's always plan for the worst. And hopefully you don't have to exercise any of these plan B, but it will impact greatly of the European startup scene. And during COVID, actually, a lot of the top tier one from the Sequoia to Lightspeed, they all set up shop in London mostly, but this will impact Europe. So we just sort of need to brace and make sure that if you think about raising, who knows what's going to happen and what it's going to do to the stock market, we will trigger down to venture. So we just need to be aware as a founder.
Yeah, and we have a couple founders dealing with these issues now too, and I don't have the answers for them. I had a founder ask me this morning, how do I pay my developers in Russia right now? I don't want them to stop working.
Yeah, you can't.
How am I going to get them paid? Am I just tell them, please keep working, I'm going to pay you later? I mean, those are the kinds of issues. And then another company is, has a Ukrainian development team who is not working, right? And is obviously busy doing other things at the moment. So, this impacts, our startups directly in that way, as well as just kind of the global, issues. So, yeah. I don't think anybody has the answers just yet to some of these questions, right? So, all right, so if you guys have a question for our panelists, you can put it in the Q&A function or raise your hand and ask it on screen. A question about wireless connectivity in even more modern countries like Australia. What limitations do you see, technological or otherwise, expanding into Asia? Even in Australia, I am surprised about that, although I've definitely had this experience. I feel like the phone connectivity, honestly, is getting worse rather than better in the globe in general. Like, why is that happening? I don't know. But every phone call, customer support service call, whatever I've had lately, I can't even hear them. I'm like, really? This is as good as it gets right now? I can't even hear you. Anyway, so to Tim's question about limitations of expanding into Asia, technological or otherwise, who wants to tackle that? Anyone? I know Takaho in Japan, it's not a problem. You guys are.
I mean, yeah, we have, especially in the metropolitan, we have like a 5G mostly. So I don't know how many problem, but then if you go to like very countryside, so we have 3 major mobile carrier, SoftBank, Docomo, AU, and some regions, we don't have any SoftBank, or there's a poor connectivity in the SoftBank. But then it's called cloud Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi can kind of automatically detect the most efficient carrier, and then they can connect it. So I rented the cloud Wi-Fi in Japan for my husband, and so he keep having a 5G everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then my phone was SoftBank, sometimes my phone doesn't connect, but his phone can connect. Mm-hmm. Why this is my Japanese phone? You're foreign with the Wi-Fi. Why your phone is better? But anyway, I'm not sure if I'm answering this question, but then definitely. In Japan, it's very difficult because you have to know Japanese. I actually had my husband to look for the best Wi-Fi in Japan, and he couldn't. Mm-hmm. But and then try and find it in Japanese, I could have found very easily. Mm-hmm. So I think that my answer will be knowing maybe language or company.
Talking about Australia, they speak English over there.
Yeah, I know. I have no.
Yeah, I hadn't heard this about Australia. That's
yeah.
But certainly, like I said, I've had a lot of phone calls with the Philippines lately that I couldn't hear a thing. I don't know what is going on there, but every time I can't connect with somebody now, I'm blaming Russia.
Could be the reason.
Edith, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think, expanding to Asia is not necessarily only a technology roadblock. I think in general, if you think about going to Asia, there's so many different languages, there's so many different currency, there's so many different regulatory, just different. And then, so in some sense, I remember a long time ago when I was working on Dolphin browser. So one of the trick, although we were doing a mobile browser, so relatively easy for localization because there's not a whole lot of word that you need to translate on a browser. But one of the trick that we did is just to start with, we only translated the App Store description without translating the product itself. Because we didn't want to support so many different languages without knowing if there's actually a real need of our product in that particular geography. So it was a relatively cheap way to see, like, because if they search locally in their local language, then we'll start seeing some install. And that was sort of like a tiptoeing, and then decide what is like the stack rank the priority of which country you want to go after. And then once you get in, you have to think about if you're going to start have customers and payment, is there any requirement to actually set up local? And also I remember going to Singapore, learning about like pricing itself, because there's certain countries would not be able to afford the normal pricing that you would do in the developed world. So Indonesia and India, you have to price differently, and Android, for Play, they allow you to do like, I don't know, like 49 cents, like something like unique. So I really think that we should, do more research, have a more sort of holistic. Asia is huge. It's not like one country, it's just so many.
Right. All right, next question. Do you have an opinion about the future of the gaming space in relation to crypto, NFTs, and specifically the play to earn space? Yeah, play to earn, so interesting, right? Who was talking that? Maybe Edith, do you have an opinion about that? You might be the best for that one too.
I'm very skeptical. Not because they're not interesting, but I think that a lot of games they are interesting. There's so many players because the players literally make a living on the game, and it's almost a little bit like a Ponzi scheme.
Right. That's how it seems to me. I'm like, what? It's just to increase your numbers, and then somehow you're like robbing Peter to pay Paul,
So for race, we actually don't do B2C as much, but we definitely love to look at things that is NFT infrastructure to basically help the developers rather than investing in the game. But I think I'm going to look up an article and share with everybody here. I read a really great article a few weeks ago, basically sort of distinguish, is this a pure Ponzi scheme, or are there other way of monetization, from selling virtual goods to advertising to various, if there's an economy that is building like outside of just the pure mechanics for giving them free money to play, then there's a real game business. But I think gaming business is, regardless of your crypto or not, is all about operating the game, understand how to run these campaigns, and is a ongoing. But Animoca from Hong Kong certainly have done really, really well. Yat, who I think also support Boost startups, if not he should, seriously have done really well in the gaming investment space. So not for me doesn't mean that it's not great industry.
Yeah. Eja or Takaho, do you guys have any opinion about that space, the NFT and the gaming, the play to earn space?
I mean, personally, I'm a huge fan of this kind of play to earn space. Most of like the YouTuber that I'm subscribing, like somebody's playing the game and you've been watching forever. And then, if you go to Japan, all the kids doing that, watching somebody's playing Fortnite, Minecraft, it's crazy. And it's weird that Japan is kind of an origin for this kind of metaverse kind of concept of a game, Pokemon, role playing, and Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and I'm actually a huge fan of playing it. So I think it's it's still behind, but this NFT metaverse kind of concept will come up to Japan soon. And especially they have such a strong culture for anime. It's still technology-wise, it's still behind. But I think once those comic artists, like Demon Slayer, Dragon Ball, those big player on the comic and artists will join this NFT, I think it's going to be huge. So I'm actually hoping a couple of projects in Japan to launch those NFT program from, especially anime, because I'm a huge fan of anime. And also, I know a lot of people trying to do it, but the technology-wise, it's a little bit behind. So if you understand the technology, and also the Japanese people are not good at making money from contents. Believe me, I was in that industry. We created such a good content, but we can't make money.
Really?
So,
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Japan has got to be making money off its anime industry, no?
Yeah. It's like, I think if we have a 10% of Disney business skill, we could be even bigger than Disney. That's something I believe. So if you those people, engineer, business people can help those anime creator, I think it's going to be huge.
Last night I was with my family, we were playing this guessing game with Alexa. I forget what it's called, but you think of a character and she'll guess it. And it was interesting because her third question is always, is it an anime character? I'm like, wow, that is just tells you how huge that market is. That first question is gender. Second question is this a real person or not? Third question is this an anime character? I'm like, whoa, So it's interesting. Such a huge industry globally. Eja, do you have any comments about this new emerging space?
Yeah, I think just this Web3, metaverse, NFT, all this thing, I think even for people in Mongolia, they're really into it. I know we are spending money buying like things. So I think this is like, like in terms of timing, this is for the first time, like the entire world is getting into it all together. And it's a very exciting space to be, definitely. And there seems to be like, I know a lot of like, we're using the existing infrastructures to build kind of like our own like city in the metaverse, right? So there's a lot of like one-off projects for creators and designers in Mongolia to kind of like leverage it and bring it home to Mongolia. So I think it's very exciting space for sure.
Yeah, so well, that brings me to a really good point, which is that our next webinar is on Thursday and it's on the metaverse. So if you are interested in this topic, it's all we'll be talking about on Thursday at 1 o'clock. And we've got some amazing guest speakers lined up for that. So we've got Annie Zhang, who's with Roblox and also has a metaverse podcast. Devin Ehrig, who is a mentor at Blue Startups and has been in the AR, VR, and now FX space for a long time, many decades, was living in Hong Kong for a long time, but is now back in LA. And other amazing people, oh, how can I forget? Of course, Danta Leagues, your colleague, Eja from cohort 13, will be on that call. They're esports Little League for kids. So we'll be talking all things metaverse on Thursday. And we'll wrap it up here. I want to thank all of our panelists, Edith Yeung, Takaho, Eja, everyone for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in. Part of this webinar was recorded. I forgot to hit the record button right away, but the last 3/4 of it was recorded and will be put on our YouTube channel. As I mentioned previously, Blue Startups is recruiting for cohort 14. So if you have a startup, please do apply. We are looking always for startups in this category as well, the East meets West. So cross-border startups coming out of Asia, looking at getting into the US, startups in the US that are looking to access Asian markets are something that we're always looking for. So one of our key pillars for recruitment. And I think that wraps it up. Thanks you guys very much for joining us. Thank you. And we'll see you next time. Aloha.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.